A big dip in U.S. consumer sentiment, marking its second lowest level ever. The University of Michigan's index of consumer sentiment tumbled to 50.8% in May from 52.2% just the month before. The poll also shows that people now expect prices to rise by 7.3% over the next year. That's up from 6.5% last month. Tariff concerns are driving that spike. Adding to consumer worries, Walmart, America's largest retailer, is warning that it will be raising its prices within weeks. It says import taxes imposed by President Trump are still too high and will have to pass along those costs to shoppers. Okay, so what do rising inflation expectations and new payment options mean for American households? To chat more about that, let's turn to Annie Cole, money coach and founder of Money Essentials for Women, to help us discuss and make our way through this. Annie, good to see you. Thanks for coming in on this Friday evening.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Okay, so let's talk about consumer sentiment in the U.S., because right now, in many ways, it could not be worse. The second worst ever recorded in U.S. history. So how will Walmart's tariff-related price hikes affect other retailers and consumer behavior?
You know, I think we're going to continue to have consumers having this fear that's kind of overwhelming all around their finances. You know, we don't know what's going to happen next, so we are afraid. We're seeing more and more people holding on to their cash and putting as much aside in their savings as they can. We're also seeing that with the price hikes at Walmart, we're likely going to see price hikes at other stores. So, you know, with the increasing prices all around, I think consumers are going to continue to be afraid and probably budget as much as possible to limit their spending in every category that they can.
You know, I hear what you're saying, save, budget, but this is not a nation of savers. The United States has a history of living beyond its means. Buy now, pay later. Expand Klarna just a bit, if you will, and what its partnership with Walmart reveals about American spending habits and its financial needs.
You know, it's really interesting. The buy now, pay later, if we think about the history of this, we used to think about Christmas shopping. You know, we'd go out for Christmas shopping, we maybe wouldn't have all the money ready, so we would do layaway or a version of buy now, pay later. And that was specifically set aside for one shopping trip or a one-time-a-year thing. Nowadays, everything is so expensive that we're actually using buy now, pay later as an alternative to buy something we want. But I do want to remove some of the stigma around this, because some people are using it, they are impulse shopping and they're using it because it's nice and easy, but other people are using it to truly cover their needs and they're not bringing in enough income. So it's really a lifesaver for people who need to use it, but it's a double-edged sword in that it can easily get you into debt.
Yeah, this buy now, pay later, as you talked about, can it be, I mean, obviously it can be a helpful tool, but in any way are you concerned that this could be a debt trap in disguise for many people who just don't budget well and don't save well?
Absolutely. I think the most important thing, just like you would use with a credit card, we should only be spending what we know we can pay back. So even though buy now, pay later is offering interest-free payments, we still are borrowing money that we may not have. So the best thing we can do is spend within our means. If we know that we need to buy ahead and we're going to get a paycheck next week, using that buy now, pay later to get some money in the interim is a great idea. If we're using it in an ongoing basis, it's definitely going to be more of a debt trap.
You know, Annie, it's interesting you talk about credit cards, because balances are down in the first quarter. However, delinquencies are up. What does that tell you about household finances?
I think it's a mixed bag. There are folks that have the money and are not making the payments, and there are people who are still bringing in enough income to make their payments on time. I honestly think that it is a little bit showing of the risk that we're all feeling and that we all want to hold on to our cash. So if we have a chance to potentially take a break on paying our debts to pay something else or to keep a little extra in the bank, that might be something that consumers are doing to just hold on to money and potentially pay a small fee to be behind on their debt payments.
Yeah, and to talk more about the money that people do have, what do the changing payment preferences signal to you about the broader economy? Because in many ways, it seems like people are ready for prices to go up significantly, as much as 7%. So it's almost like buckle up, we're in for the worst.
Everyone I've talked to is feeling that way. They are preparing themselves. They are trying to budget and prepare for those expenses. I think one of the things I'm seeing more and more people do that are planners, they're trying to plan ahead and actually identify the places they can pull back in their budget so that they're preemptively trying to be more thoughtful about everything about their finances, their saving, and their spending habits.
You know, and let's talk a bit about the University of Michigan consumer sentiment report that came out? Because it did come out before the news broke about China and the U.S. coming to this 90-day deal about tariffs moving forward. So what's your major takeaway from this Michigan Consumer Survey study? Because the second worst on record makes people go, wow, things are worse than I thought.
You know what's interesting? I just happen to be running some focus groups asking Americans about their perceptions of the news lately. I've been doing that over the last few weeks. And what I'm hearing from the average American is that they are so bombarded with the news and they don't really know how to decipher a lot of the news, especially when it came to some of the tariff issues. So my sense is that a lot of people have general fear and it might not be related to a particular story. It's almost like the overwhelm of information is too hard to decipher on a day-to-day basis. So it's resulting in a general freeze state that's overwhelming for the average American.
Okay, let me push back just a tad because it's just so chaotic. You can't plan from one day to the next because you see these massive swings. Okay, we're going to have tariffs. No, we're not going to have tariffs. Well, we're going to have tariffs, but not as much as we first thought. Well, maybe we will have as much as we think. So what, this information coming out of Washington, it's not calming for not just people in the United States, but for the global economy. And if people stop buying stuff, look at what happened in China. People stopped buying there, and it began to drag that massive economy down, and it could happen here just like that.
Absolutely. I mean, we're even seeing this. I read something recently about buying houses has been going down. So the average consumer is also not maybe jumping on the house they would have wanted to buy because of this general fear. So it's showing up in all kinds of ways that we are just generally holding onto our money and trying to feel more secure for as long as possible because we don't know what's going to happen next. And it is changing day to day.
Annie Cole, thanks for your insight. Good stuff. Thank you so much.
Thank you.